We'll get everything ready. So tonight today I got a special treat for you guys. You guys will remember that we're in our Testify series where we're talking a lot about this idea of sharing our stories. And so today I'm going to have Vickie come up in just a minute, but I want to do a little setup real quick, get everything squared away so when she comes up here, she can have as little stage time as possible because she is terrified of the stage. When I first asked her, I said, "Hey, Vickie," I said, what do you think about coming up on stage with me? She's like, "Nope. Like I would do anything other than that." But talked about the idea of sharing her story, and Vickie feels very responsible for the story that God's given her, and so she's going to share that. But to get started, remember this series, we're talking, really the goal is to equip you, to empower you, to get you to the place where you would share your story. It's not just so you hear somebody else's story and go, "I'm so glad God did that," but it's really based off this idea of, man, getting you to realize that all of us have places where God has intersected our lives that we ought to be talking about. And the key verse for kind of our series is this: they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They didn't love their lives so much as to shrink from death. And so as I was getting ready, I've got some goals that I'll be sharing with the elders. On Saturday, we get together. We have this big kind of annual thing that we're doing. And as I went through it, I thought, if we get you guys sharing your stories, if we do nothing else right but do that, that's going to change so many people's eternity. It's going to change our lives as well. And so a couple things before we just dive in. Remember that as we're sharing stories, that they're not going to have perfect endings. They're not going to be nicely written where you leave here going, "That's amazing." Sometimes it's just a story of, let me tell you what God did, and I'm still living in the midst of it. One of the things that we'll talk about at the end today, Vickie had this brilliant statement when she and I met to kind of get ready for this, where she said, "Hey, Mike, just because someone is past the injury doesn't mean they're past the pain or the payment." And we'll unpack that a little bit to just remember, hey, just because God's moved in your life doesn't mean it's all better and easy. And so we'll talk about some of those things. But my encouragement to you, because our stories won't be complete, you're going to have lots of questions. I would encourage you, go ahead and afterwards go to those people and ask them questions. Be respectful. There may be times where they don't want to answer a question. Vickie's going to be up here today. We've got a couple that's going to talk about trying to start their family and how difficult that was. We're going to talk about grief at some point, addiction at some point, legacy. I would say go up to those people and have a conversation. I think that could be one of the coolest outcomes of this series, is you guys getting to know each other better. Because I think we have this tendency to go, well, we know each other, but then you find out more about each other. There's a guy in our church who expressed some things that I didn't know about his life, about when he was a young man, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm fascinated by that. I want to know more about that." So I hope it'll lead you to asking more questions, getting to know each other better. So what I want to do is invite Vickie up on stage. Vickie, come on up here. Would you guys give Vickie a round of applause? Yeah, by the way, so when we were talking about being up on stage, she's like, "Oh, I don't know, and I'm not going to sleep." And then we finish first service, and David comes up to me. He's like, "That's one of the best sermons I've ever heard in my life." He's like, "Vickie's amazing." So good job, no pressure. But there you go. For those of you who don't know Vickie, she is our children's pastor and administrative assistant, kind of runs the office for us. Started out, you've been here 20 years. Started out kind of in the office, proved faithful, had a heart for kids, started doing that. I got here and I was like, "Man, you are an amazing children's pastor." I've told you this to your face. I don't think you believe me because of all the other stuff I've said about you. But you are the best children's pastor I've ever interacted with in ministry. Like, I believe that with everything in me. I really do. That's not like I don't say things to be nice to you. So, a compliment comes.
That's the truth.
So, but you really are. I mean, you're really good at speaking to parents' lives. You get the balance between gotta love the kids, but really if you're going to change people, it's going to be changing parents' lives. You help our kids understand salvation and Jesus and baptism, and you do an amazing job. So I don't want to praise you anymore. So let's go ahead, and that feels weird to me. We're going to ask a series of questions. Everybody that we bring up on stage, we're going to ask most of these same questions just to let you guys get to know her a little bit better. I mean, these are like soul level, matter to people if they're going to follow you. Who's your favorite band? So, like, who do you got? Favorite band?
Well, one of the benefits of being a children's minister and having attended so many dance competitions in my life is there is not much music that I will not listen to. But if you're going to have me narrow it down, the one that's playing on my phone right now is Elevation Worship and the song Never Lost a Battle. If you haven't heard it, you need to listen to it. And then the other one I would say is on our road trips, we always pack our Patsy Cline CD because everybody sings along to it and we have a great time, and that's not one we leave at home. So I think that would be the...
Now, I think you churched up your answer though, right? Because like when I asked you who your favorite band was, you told me it was Salt and Pepper. So that's who you said. So then now we're on stage, you're like, what, how do you Jesus up Salt and Pepper? And so you just, I mean...
You got to have a little, you know...
You like, she danced, but she's like, get it. Okay. What sport or activity did you excel at most in high school?
Okay, so I decided into my freshman year, I stopped playing softball, stopped cheer. So that was the end of my sports career. I don't know if you know this about sports, but you get sweaty. And I don't like to sweat. So I decided at that point I better focus on something else. So I decided that, I'd heard if you on your college applications, it looks amazing to be part of the leadership team in different groups. So I took that upon as my challenge. And I mean, there wasn't a group. I was not a president, vice president, something in.
All right, how about favorite candy bar or treat?
Okay, I have two. And the reason I have two is because I only get these once a year. So I want you all to just be there with me. Okay. If you did not get the puppy chow that was offered during the sale that the O'Hara's did.
The O'Hara bake sale.
Hit that up next time that they're in there. They gifted me a box about this big for Christmas. I made that baby last for a month. Just taking a little piece at a time. It was so good. So the puppy chow, and then my other one only comes around once a year too, and that's the Hershey's eggs, the candy-coated eggs. They're super hard to find. So I've got to, like, whenever I find one, I grab it and put it up for the year.
All right. I know part of your story is you're so old that you were on a boat once with your in-laws for a year. Tell us about, no, not that.
I love my in-laws. So
but no boat. There was no boat with animals and all that good stuff. So Vickie and I have an ongoing joke. I think I'm just a little bit older than you, right? Like how much older am I than you?
For real. I told everybody first hour 15.
Years.
15
you said 15 years earlier, yes.
But really, I think we're about the same year.
So yours... Although in your story, we'll get into it, you like Jell-O a lot more than I do, so we'll talk about that. What's one of your favorite things about Tuttle Christian Church?
That's an easy one. The people. Not only do they love the people that come here, they love people outside of here. And you see people impacting people's lives outside of this church. And I love that about the people that attend here. So my favorite thing about TCC is the people.
Is the people. Good. So the part of your story, because you have a big story. I mean, you have all kinds of different places where God's intersected. The part that I want us to talk about today is when you got seriously sick and kind of all the chaos that came with that. So set the stage, and you can correct me any of them wrong. So it's 2011. You've been working at TCC for 11 years. You've been married 15, 16, somewhere in there. I think you said married 96, right? So you're right in there. Bree is a teenager. Bree is their oldest daughter. Just an incredible human being, high functioning. I mean, she is like a faithful, independent woman, human resources manager now. But this time she's early teens, 14, 15. Alyssa's in elementary school, so the school was burning down at that point. I mean, that's, if you remember a painful, that's my buddy Alyssa. And then Ambi was pre-K, kindergarten, right? So all that's going on. So, I mean, you're busy. You're working at a church. You've got this young family, and you get sick. You're at a dance contest. So maybe just pick us up from right there.
Well, it had been an ongoing process of visiting a gastroenterologist to get answers, but the answers weren't coming quite quickly, and things just kept getting worse. But, if you're a parent, you're going to go to everything that your child is doing. So that was one of the things. She was having this competition in Dallas, Texas, and I was bound and determined I was going to drive her there and be there the whole entire weekend. That was one of the roughest weekends. I couldn't eat without getting sick, so didn't eat for 3 days straight. I would find little pieces that were just the what do you call that on the
ducks? No. Tile.
Just yes, the tile.
So we have a little game we play where it's fill in the blank.
You'll get more of that later.
And the game is to fill in the blank with the wrong word, just to see what Vickie does. So so tile.
I'd find tile pieces just to lay my head on because it was so cold and it felt so good. So misery the whole entire weekend. So I decided when we were it's God's grace we got back. But when we got back, I was going to go say, no, we're not working. So I went to Dr. Parikh and I said, whatever we're doing is not working. I'm sick. And he did a scan that day and he said, I didn't even get to go home. He sent me straight to the hospital and he said, you're going to stay here for at least the next week. I'll let you know if anything changes. So get comfy. So in that week, high levels of IVs and all kinds of medicines, couldn't eat. They would not let me eat anything because they determined it was a tear in my colon and you cannot have food in your system because it will go to the rest of your body and cause much worse problems. So he just said, no food, you're going to be in here for a week with an IV. And he thought at that time, as much as he could, that we had conquered the problem.
Okay. So you go back, you're still sick, you're still having some issues. Talk to me about February 26th. I know you, as we were talking about it, you said there was this moment where your husband and your Uncle Jimmy kind of were just like, whoa, wait a minute, something's not right here.
So I went into work. It was Charlie's birthday. For his work, they get off on their birthday. So he happened to be home that day. And I tell him, I get random visits from my uncles all the time. They say it's to come up here and make sure I'm working. I say it's because I'm their favorite niece and they got to have more time with me. But that day it happened to be Jimmy that came up here. And Jimmy said, I don't even remember what the conversation was about that day. But he called Charlie and he said, she has no business being at work today. You need to go up there and go get her. So Charlie knew that we had established the relationship with Dr. Parikh, so that's where he took me. Mm-hmm. But we got to Dr. Parikh. He did a few initial exam things, and he said, take her straight to the ER. So we got over to the ER, and they had set me down. I mean, I was still kind of out of it, in and out. But in my room with me were Karen, Greg, and Charlie. I remember them all standing there. The ER doctor came in and he said, you have terminal brain cancer. There's nothing you can do except for go home and pray about it.
Which, I love you. So you've got to tell them, what was your reaction, right? Because most of us, we hear, hey, you got terminal cancer, you're going to die. I think it's, oh no. What was it went through your mind right away?
I looked at those three standing there and I said, that's not what it is. So I refused to hear that.
If you know nothing about the Williams, you got to know there's this stubbornness. It's like, you're going to die. Nope. Like, oh, okay. Well, then I guess you're not going to. So I love that part of your story.
So we then, my doctor that we had went to initially that day, he was busy doing his office work, but after he got done, came over because he was super worried, came in and he said, I agree with you. I don't think that's what it is either. Let's do some more tests. So that started numerous tests there in the hospital that day, all over my body. And that also started the many multiple hospital stays. I can't even tell you how many times I had been in the hospital throughout this time period. This is the end of 2011 into 2012.
So in and out of the hospital, just constantly. And you still do have, while it's not brain cancer, there is something going on with your brain, causing issues, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we had figured out is the infection had spread through my body, multiple places. So I had, anything that was vital was affected by this infection that was in my body.
So you ended up in a care facility, is that right?
So one of those times, whenever you're in the hospital for so long, they, after 2 weeks or so, and they think that they have you pretty much under control, they'll send you to an extended care place, saves them money. So one of these times I got sent to these extended care places. And they had, I know whenever they were trying to decide which one to send us to, they had brought in 3 places for Charlie to look at, and he finally picked one. But the running thing about this place is that they pureed the food. And I should have known at that time, but they pureed the food. So the running joke in the family is, what did you eat today? And I'd have to, I don't know. It was something, but I was so excited to have
I do think it's important at this point in your story to stop. Say, we joke about me being older, but you've been in a care facility with pureed food. So, and you developed kind of an addiction to Jell-O, right?
And
so,
Jell-O.
yeah. So, if we're saying who's older,
I think
whatever.
that my love for Jell-O is because every place had Jell-O, and you knew what Jell-O was. So I think
it's just one thing you love Jell-O. Your eyes right now, you're like, oh, Jell-O, man,
Jell-O.
this is so good.
Put fruit in it. Oh my goodness.
So, tell us about the Fruit Loops too, because I know when we were talking, that was one of the funny parts about. So you can only get pureed food, But I mean, you got Fruit Loops in our
My
notes.
mom felt bad for me. Thank you, Mom. And she said, "What do you want?" And I said, "How about Fruit Loops? Because I can put them in the cabinet and they won't know that they're there." Because, they monitor all your blood sugars and everything else that's going on with your body while you're in there. So they're going to know something's up. But we smuggled in Fruit Loops.
And what about Katie? Because I know Katie Owens hooked you up too.
My longtime friend Katie had communicated with me while I was in there, heard the joke about the pureed food, and she goes, "That's not good enough for you. You tell me what you want to eat, and I will bring you a full meal." So we decided on Olive Garden, which was amazing. So she brings in the Olive Garden. We sit down, and she said, "So do you know much about where you're staying?" And I'm like, "No, I'm going to be here for when they tell me I can go home, and I'll be here." And she goes, "Charlie's put you in a nursing home." I never got to leave my room, so I didn't know who all was around me, but yes.
I love that you've been in a nursing home already for the next 25 years. Like,
So
when I'm finally going into mine, I'm going to call you up and be like, "Hey, Vic, so this is where my family's putting you
down.
down."
Got you, Mike. I'll bring the Fruit Loops.
And the Jell-O, apparently.
And the Jell-O.
So I need some Jell-O. So now, you talk about the sickness, you talk about, the stuff that was going on gastro-wise, but also brain-wise. And I want to hit on that a little bit because, I mean, when you're in high school, you're one of the valedictorians of your class. You go on, you get a bachelor's degree, you get a master's degree in counseling. I mean, you're incredibly intelligent. And then now you have this infection that's taking stuff away from you. I mean, talk a little bit about that, because it cost you a lot, right? Like, I mean, it really did take some of that mental capacity and just put it through the ringer.
It did. I remember, even way back then, if somebody needed something in the church, like phone number, email, whatever, it was all in my head. I mean, there wasn't many people that I didn't have memorized in my head. Numbers were easy, spelling was easy, everything was easy. So the doctor came in, that was whenever I was in ICU at OU. Doctor came in and he held up this thing. It was just a pen, but I looked at it. He said, "What is this?" And I just did. I knew what you did with it, but I could not tell you what that thing was. And so he looked down and he did this, he had a little watch on. I couldn't even tell him what a watch was. He said, "Okay, got another one for you. Who's the president of the United States?" That should be easy, right? It's 2012. I said, "Osama bin Laden."
Now, Vickie's not making a political statement. There's no political statement in that. That's just where you went to.
And that one popped right out. I was so proud. And he's like, "No."
So right there, he'd have been like, "Are you being mean, or like you're sick?" So, but there was a grace, like God gave you a grace in that. There was something you didn't forget that I think it's so God. It's so beautiful. I mean, talk about that a little bit.
My children came in, and I was so worried about this. When my children came in, I was still able to tell their names and recognize them and recognize my husband. And God never took that away from me. So I thank him for that, because I can't imagine as a child walking in and your parent just looks at you, so.
Yeah. When you told me that part of your story, I remember just thinking that's so like God in the middle of even trauma and stuff like that just happens because we live in a broken world, to go, "Hey, your husband needs to be known. Your daughters need to be known. And you need to be able to recognize them, to think how good God is in those little things, which become big moments." I mean, I know when we talk about it, for you, that's like a really big moment that God gave you that, which I think is pretty cool. So end of 12, many doctors, specialists, you end up going to the Mayo Clinic. Talk about that a little bit. So
the internal problem, they figured out. They had that down, and they told me, "Okay, we know what that is. That we still see that spot in your brain that we can't figure out what it is. So we're going to..." Like a void? No. Yeah. A shadow. We'll just go with shadow. A shadow. That's what they called it. See why? I could be a doctor. So they said, "We're going to send you to the place that knows everything." So I got hooked up with going to the Mayo Clinic. And let me back up from that. The other thing that they found out was wrong with the internal problems was a continued infection from my colon. They said, "We can cure that, but you've got to give up your colon." And at that time, I'm like, "You can live without a colon?" Right. I wouldn't know that. What? Yeah. So I said, "Okay, let's do it. Take it out." So that was before we went to the Mayo Clinic. So that started that process. Now, talk about that, though, right? Because I know when I asked you about that, you said you didn't ask them any questions about the surgery.
and then you were kind of surprised a little bit by what came out of it? I mean, just real briefly, so you're getting ready to have surgery, but you don't want to know.
No. They did so many things to me in the hospital. I got to the point, I'm like, I don't want to know, just do it. If the doctor says that's what's supposed to happen, let's do it. Well, this is one of those situations. We need to take your colon. Well, they had kind of mentioned what's going to happen. I'm like, I don't want to know, just do it. So I woke up from the first surgery. It was going to be 3 surgeries. Woke up from the first surgery. My colon was gone, and I had a colostomy bag added. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up whenever you get home. But
it's fun Googling that one.
It's a nightmare to anybody who doesn't know what it is, and you wake up with one.
And you didn't know you were going to have that. So to wake up, I mean, you talk about a shock, right? Like you wake up, and now your bowels are basically on the outside of you for a season.
Yeah.
Right? That's crazy.
And so that was the first surgery. Second surgery, they rebuilt a colon with what was left of your internal organs. And the third surgery, they take out the colostomy bag, and you're fixed from that point on with the colon problems.
Right. It's amazing. All right. So now you end up at the Mayo Clinic. Talk about that a little bit.
So at the Mayo Clinic, they had multiple tests. I mean, whenever you go in there, they want you to see every specialist that there is. And the Mayo Clinic is all the time. I mean, just so many people there. So to get in with the doctor is a miracle. So I had to get in with like 6 of them, multiple tests. I probably saw, probably 8 doctors while I was there. Couldn't see them all. So that wasn't even all of them that I got to see. And I decided then that we were just going to let them do what they needed to do. So
whatever had to happen was going to happen. And
let's do it.
And they were going to get you healthy. So through this process, I know we said that, you were in a lot of pain. I mean, I remember you talking about some of the things that they did. It wasn't just like, ooh, that hurt for a minute. A lot of pain. So you end up on Percocet. And so there's this 2-year period in your life where Percocet was given you for pain management. But then now you're coming to the end of it. You're coming through a healing process, but 2 years on Percocet, now you're addicted to painkillers. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? Because I think, that's one of those, we hide that, that's not okay to talk about, but that's like a reality sometimes when you go through a lot of trauma and pain like this.
Yes. So we started on the Percocet back whenever I had the brain surgery. That was one of the most painful surgeries you can ever have as somebody taking your brain apart. So started the Percocet then, and then with all of the hospital stays, I had cords coming out of my body at all times. So I continued on the Percocet through the 3 surgeries in 2013, continued on the Percocet. So for 2 years straight, pretty much, I don't know if you've ever had anybody in your family or you have been involved with painkillers, but you get where your body says, no, I need that. Whether you really do need that or you don't need that, your body says you need that. So you've convinced yourself, I need that. So
you come up to this moment where your doctor says, I'm not your doctor anymore, so no more painkillers. I think you said you had 1 or 2 days left.
Right. The third surgery, he said, I'm done with you now. You need to go see another doctor if you want to refill that medication.
Right. But in this time, so you've become addicted to it. And talk to me about what your family and friends did for you, because I think that was a pretty cool, courageous moment.
Yes. I had 2 or 3 family members that just said, Vickie, you're not you whenever you're on those. I really think you should evaluate if you need to be on those. And then that, you start thinking, what are they talking about? I'm not me. Well, that's,
Right. So there's almost like an offense, maybe, like, how dare you? But what's cool about your story is you actually considered it, right? Like you started weighing out, what are they saying? Because I think sometimes, we have friends that are maybe addicted and we don't say anything because we're afraid of how it's going to change them. But in your case, them speaking up really was a big deal, right?
And Charlie saying, it's prescribed, yes, but you can be addicted. So he just told me, you're addicted, period.
Right.
Didn't sugarcoat it any.
And then you actually make a decision. Because in addiction, part of it's willpower. There is a moment where you just have to make a decision. And so you make a decision, right? And what did you decide?
I decided I was just going to get off of them.
Right. Cold turkey, right?
Let's do it.
Oh, my goodness.
So it was one of the probably 4 to 5 days in my most miserable part of, you go through all these surgeries and everything else. You say that you were most miserable whenever you came off that medication. It's the truth. Your body hurts, and it
Right.
just, wants more.
But your mom did something really cool for you, right? I mean, talk about what your mom did. Not, she didn't go out and get her more, by the way, but like, you're like, whoa, okay. No, but I mean, your mom, instead of just saying, yeah, I'm cheering you on, like, she really thought about what can I do, and talk about what she did that was helpful.
As any mother would know, you hate to see your kids hurting. And she saw me hurt big time for those days. And she said, I'm not okay with that. I've got to get you something. So at that time, they were real into the homeopathic medicine. And she went up to that office, or to the business, and she said, this is what's going on with my daughter. Gave him the whole spiel. I'm sure they were like, lady, that is too much information. But gave him the whole spiel, and they said, okay, she needs this, this, and this. And mom brought home those 3 things that day, and she said, just try it. Please, just try it. And at that point, you're like, please, just give me something that will help. And so I did, and that started the process of getting better.
Yeah, and that part of your story I love, because I think, when we run into someone with an addiction, it's easy to think I've done the most loving thing because I've mentioned it or because I'm cheering them on. But there are things you can do. And sometimes you go, there's a guy in the church, one of his sons is dealing with an addiction, and he made a decision. Okay, every week I'm going to go spend time with that son. I'm going to invest in him. I'm going to walk with him. And so I love that your mom was going, it's not enough for me just to hope. It's not enough for me to cheer you on. What can I do? And I think for the rest of us, it's going, you got someone that's struggling, get in there, like figure out what you can do. I think is really cool. So good. So we talk a little bit about addiction. What would you say to someone right now has a painkiller addiction? Because we treat, opium and meth and marijuana one way and painkillers another. And I mean, addiction is addiction. What do you say to someone struggling with an addiction who's hiding it right now?
Get help. Speak up. There's people around you that will not judge you for that. If they won't help you, I will. I've been there. I know what it's like. Find somebody around you who will listen to you.
Yeah. I think maybe that's the thing, is understand you're loved more than you think you'll be shamed, because you think that. But the other thing that was really cool when we were talking is you talked about how helpful people were. And we talked about Charlie was a champ. You said, man, he, that whole better or worse part, sickness and health, that like he was in it. He took care of you as a wife in a way that you go, most men may run away from.
Yeah, he saw more things that, God bless him, that he was still there for and still stuck around for. So.
Right, which is awesome. You've got Bree, who is your oldest daughter, who at 14 is doing your house finances. I'm 48. I think we have money. I don't know how all that works, right? But here's a 14-year-old with passwords, paying bills. I mean, so that's amazing, right? She's stepping in the gap. You've got Christy, who is taking care of your kids, taking care of you. I remember we were talking about it. I'm like, well, how did Christy do all that? And you went, Mike, she's my sister, man.
She kind of do it.
Yeah, like you were her. No, that's just who Christy is. Her character and your whole family is the helping family, right? Mm-hmm. But there were 2 groups of people that you mentioned, and it was cool for me because as I heard this part of your story, it wasn't who they were, it's what they did and how simple it was. And so those 2 groups, one are Greg and Karen Williams. Love to have you talk about them. And the other was just this idea of meals, which I know for you is a big deal because someone's sick, you're on that. But talk to me about like the simple thing that those 2 groups of people did that made such a big difference.
Okay, so Greg and Karen, whenever they found out we were going to, I had multiple people visit me in the hospital, which is awesome. But they were there multiple times. And then whenever they found out we were going to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, they didn't want us going by ourselves, me having to drive sick, Charlie and I splitting it. So they didn't want us to do that. And they said, we're not taking yes or no. We are driving you all to Rochester, Minnesota. So big group. We even slept in the same hotel room one night. I mean, like, get to know your family. But they were, just there along the way with all of that. And you can imagine I told you all the tests that I had to do. Your spouse being taken away for 4 hours, you sitting there by yourself, the worry, the boredom, all of that was filled by Karen and Greg being there with Charlie.
And I love that, right? Because as we were talking about it, there's this sense that Greg and Karen didn't bring anything with them. It wasn't like they had great medical knowledge or, I've got all the right answers. They were just present, right? I mean, that was the big deal, right? Just being present. Mm-hmm. So I think there's so many times when we see people struggling, we don't show up because we don't have an answer. And yet when I remember hearing that part of your story, I thought, oh man, showing up is the answer, right? That's the big deal, is when someone's just there and you didn't need anything from them.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. Well, and then the other group, you talked a lot about, you come home and you're sick, and kids still need to eat, kids still need to go to dance and to cheer and all the other things that they're doing. Talk just maybe for a minute or two about what it meant to you to have other people do those simple things, right?
I couldn't have made it without people jumping in and doing things. And I know you think the simplest things, you're going, I'm not making an impact. Let me tell you, you are. I could not get up and make a meal for my family, but we wanted to eat together. So every time I came home from a surgery, there was not a time that there was a meal there that I couldn't bring my family to the table and we all eat there together. And I didn't have to lift a finger to do it. Charlie didn't have to lift a finger. All provided for us. So if you think that just a simple meal or just dropping something at their door isn't making a difference, it is.
Yeah. Well, and one of the ones that you said was a big difference was people helping you with the kids. And we talked about that idea that you've got 3 girls who really like to be at home, and now they can't be at home because mom's sick and mom's gone and all that stuff. And what a grace it was to have people just go, hey, I'm going to have you guys come over to our house. Now, we did talk about, that grace doesn't end with the kids can come to my house. We need to be gracious on, hey, the kids are going through trauma. The kids are wondering what's going to happen to mom and where's she been. And, so, yeah, I mean, what did it mean to you to have people just show up and say, hey, I'll take the kids. They can play in my house for 2 hours. I'll take them to dance. Like, why was that such a big deal for you?
It made somewhat of their life normal. And I can't thank the people enough that did that for my kids, because none of them slept or like to spend the night at other people's houses. So it was a huge thing for them. Now, okay, that's my life. I'm going to have to be at different people's houses. I had people bringing them back to my house, so they had a little bit of normalcy. I had people reaching out all the time. What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And that, I mean, at mama's heart, whenever you can't do it,
yeah,
I've filled it.
Yeah, that's cool. Because I know when I first got here, someone would be sick, and you're like, we're getting meals, and we're sending gifts to the kids, and we're doing this and that. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome, but you're like really into it, and then it makes sense, right? Because you experienced, hey, this makes a difference. And I think sometimes I can see those meal lists and go, oh yeah, it's they're not going to care. But then I heard your story, and it reminded me, like, hey, you're giving me normalcy in the middle of trauma, and so if a dinner can do that, yes, like that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes we think meals aren't ministry. But wow, I mean, that can preach a sermon right there, right. So good. Well, some of the takeaways, I want to kind of draw in some of the things that we talked about, you learned, and I'll just mention some of these and just have you just kind of talk about them. You talk about when you're in the middle of the crisis, you think it's never going to be different. Like, talk to us about that for just a minute.
I can't tell you how many times that I looked at Charlie and said, is this the way that I'm going to be for the rest of my life? I mean, you go from completely independent to, I mean, you could spit off numbers like that. I then had to have somebody help me fill in words that I couldn't think of. Normal words like finger, pen. I mean, the stuff like that should just come easy. It was not easy anymore. So what do you do with that? And so I looked at him. I'm sure he got tired of hearing it, and because he couldn't answer either, he didn't know. He would just say, I don't know, babe. We're just going to have to wait and see what they tell us. But I'm sure, hard to handle with, this is my new normal.
Right. So what do you say to someone who goes, it's never going to be different?
It will be different. I can think back to that time now, and it seemed like it was years, and this is never going to be normal again. You will return to normal. If you don't return to normal, you'll return to your new normal. Things will change. And God's there every step of the way guiding that. So don't give up on God. Don't give up on yourself. Things will change.
Yeah, and that was one of the ones that really stood out to me in your story, is this idea that God is with me, right? Because I think some of us can go through that and go, why God? And for you, that question really didn't seem to pop up as we talked. It was just like, look, God's good even if my life's not. Which that was a really interesting perspective that you've got, is I don't expect everything to be wonderful, but because it's not wonderful, I don't think that says anything about the character of God, which was really cool for me to hear. I think there's a genuine faith in you that just says God's good when my circumstances are good, and God's good when they're not, and God doesn't leave me, so that God is with me part is pretty cool. You also talked about this idea, sometimes you need people to carry you in faith, right? Talk to me about, you can't pray, you can't read, you're kind of energyless when it comes to your faith. but other people praying for you made a big difference, right?
Huge difference. I had people in this church, I can't tell you the number of cards that just came into my house. We're praying for you because, they couldn't come in to see me, a lot of them, because ICUs, you can't get in there, but they wanted to know, hey, we're still covering you in prayer. And I had, so many cards, so many people call me, so many people tell me, hey, we're praying for you, we're praying for you, we're praying for you. And even whenever I can't form a sentence, I've got people covering me in prayer constantly. And that makes a huge difference for somebody that's struggling.
I think of that. We were talking about that picture in the Gospels where you got the paralytic guy who can't get to Jesus. He's not even trying to get to Jesus in this case. And his 4 friends, it's their faith that picks him up, takes him to Jesus. And Jesus says, because of your faith, I'm going to heal him. And I think, how many people were carrying you where you're like, absolutely, I can't get to him. And they're like, okay, but we can think clearly. We'll pray over you, and how powerful that is. And then this one statement, and then we'll kind of start drawing to a close a little bit. This was brilliant, Vic, and I mean this. Just because someone is past their injury, it doesn't mean they're past still paying for it or past the pain of it. Like I hear that and I'm like, yes, but flesh that out for us. What does it mean to say just because you're past the injury doesn't mean you're past paying for it or past the pain of it?
So along with taking the Percocet, part of conquering my illness was being on steroids for 2 years straight, and heavy steroids. Like where we came to the end of it, the weaning process was 2 months because it was that strong that they had me on to get my body back to normal. Well, at the Mayo Clinic, whenever I'm seeing all of the 10 doctors there, one of them was the eye doctor who said, because of your steroid use, I already see little problems in there, and you're going to have surgery in 3 years for, what was that thing called? Cataracts. He said, for sure, 3 years from now, things that 60 and up people have, you're going to have 3 years from now. And then they talked about the bone density problems that I would develop because of the steroid use. Multiple things that they told me would be problems. I just want to cover those two just to tell you kind of how God's working there. I went to the eye doctor last month, and she said, I can still see what they saw, but it hasn't changed any.
That's awesome.
7-8 years later, I still haven't had surgery. It still hasn't grown. So that's still there, but it has not affected me the way they said it was going to do. And then the bone density, had that test, and they said, you're absolutely normal for your age.
Really? I'm celebrating Jesus, but I'm wondering about the absolutely normal part. I think you might have added that. So besides the roid rage, you're better now, right? I mean, besides those moments where, did you lift a lot during the steroid use? Because I would have just been like.
Do you remember the thing I said, I don't like to sweat?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So no gym time for
sweat.
You. So yeah. Well, so some of the things we talked about that really were the cost, right? Like, I think we hear a story and we go, there was injury and God's redeeming, and you don't have the cataracts the way they anticipated, and we're like, yeah, but you're still talking about some of the things, the crushing debt, medical debt is outrageous, right? So I mean, you guys have dealt with, still are dealing with that. The cost of Charlie and the girls, Charlie's seeing things that a husband probably don't want to see, but he stays in the game. Your daughters who during critical points of their growing up are going, is mom here? Is she going to be here? What's going to happen? When we think about that idea of the injury keep going, I think about it with grief a lot of times and go, people will ask, well, I know, so-and-so died. When are you going to get over that? Like, never, right? Like, you're never going to be over everything you went through. So, I mean, I don't know, like, what are some of the long-term impact that you still feel and still deal with on a daily basis that it would be important for people to remember, not just to be nice to you, but just to go, hey, when someone goes through something, it endures. What are some of those things that you still have to deal with?
Well, I'll back up there. One of those things was every time that they mentioned hospital to my children, you could just, they started crying immediately. They're like, are you kidding? She's going back to, so anytime now that I get sick, it still comes to their mind, I'm sure, like, oh, how long is she going to be gone with this one? So that's one. The other one is when Mike got here, I told him, I said, with my girls, we've created this game for my injury. If I stall, you got to fill in the word, because that
which is a fun game.
Weird things will come to me, but normal things will not. So
And the way we play that game, I don't know if you're in on it, but the way I play that game is I try to give you the wrong word because I think it's funny to just throw like dump truck in or something like that. And you'd be surprised how quickly she gets the right answer after you give her the wrong one, where she's like, "You're an idiot, man." And then she's like, "I meant." And so that's a fun game that we play in the office.
And then the impact of, what was the other thing I was going to add there?
Dump truck. I don't know. I don't know. Well, we did talk about the relational impact, what it costs, Charlie, what it costs the girls. We talked about, some of the mental things that you have to make effort in. Because I know when I first got here, one of the things I like to train our staff, and I would just pop in questions, where I'm like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I remember one day you having the courage, which I thought this was huge, right? You had the courage to say, "Hey, Mike, that doesn't work for me," to where I could now go, "Hey, I'll give you questions 2 weeks out or 2 days out or 2 minutes out if we're being really honest," but I'm still trying, right?
I don't know if you've noticed this about him, but he works fast forward all the time.
That's right. I'm like over here. But something you did do, a takeaway that was huge for me, is you had the courage to go, "Hey, here's something that I'm still kind of dealing with. This is what I need from you." And I remember as somebody who was leading you, that was awesome, right? Because if I didn't know that, I could do damage to our friendship, our working relationship. But for you to go, "Hey, this isn't a deficit in my life. This is just something that I need help with." That was a big deal for me in leading you. So let's do this to kind of close it out. You've got the stage, right? I know you've wanted to be up here your whole life, and now you're here. You can say anything you want to a captive audience. Doesn't have to be about what we're talking about. Can be what's something, you just go, "Hey, man, in my heart, if I get one moment to tell you something, this is what I want you to hear." And then what I want to do is I want to share a chapter out of Psalms. One of the things I've been doing with each of the people is praying, "God, help me get a psalm that kind of represents kind of a blessing and also how I see them." And so I've got a psalm I want to read over you and your family. But what's one thing that you would just say, you got to know this?
I would say through all of that heaviness in your time, that depth where you are just, "I'm never going to come out of this," God is still right there beside you. Whenever you don't recognize that He's there, He's there. He cares. He wants to help you through it. He knows you. He still hears you calling out to Him, and it will change. And then I personally, when Mike approached me about this, thought how selfish of me that I wouldn't want to do that, to tell people how God has taken me from the most bottom part of my life and has restored me to where I am today. How selfish of me not to tell people how good my God is.
That's awesome. I love that. So here's the psalm that I just want to read over you. It's a little bit long, so stick with me, but there's some parts in here that I think represent you and your story and your future as well. "In you, O Lord, I've taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Rescue me and deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me and save me. Be my rock of refuge, to which I can always go. Give the command to save me, for you are my rock, you are my fortress. Deliver me, O my God, from the hand of the wicked, from the grasp of evil and cruel men. For you have been my hope, O sovereign Lord, my confidence since my youth. From birth I've relied on you. You brought me from my mother's womb. I will ever praise you. I've become like a portent to many, but you are my strong refuge. My mouth is filled with your praise, declaring your splendor all day long. Don't cast me away when I'm old, like now. Don't cast me away when I'm old. Don't forsake me when my strength is gone. For my enemies speak against me. Those who wait to kill me conspire together. They say, God has forsaken me. Pursue him and seize him, for no one will rescue him. Be not far from me, O God. Come quickly, O my God, to help me. May my accusers perish in shame. May those who want to harm me be covered with scorn and disgrace. But as for me, I will always have hope. I will praise you more and more. My mouth will tell of your righteousness, of your salvation all day long, though I know not its measure. I will come and proclaim your mighty acts, O sovereign Lord. I'll proclaim your righteousness, yours alone. Since my youth, O God, you've taught me, and to this day I declare your marvelous deeds. Even when I'm old and gray, don't forsake me, O God, till I declare your power to the next generation, your might to all who are to come. Your righteousness reaches to the skies, O God, you who have done great things. Who, O God, is like you? Though you have made me see troubles, many and bitter, you will restore my life again. For the depths of the earth, you will again bring me up. You will increase my honor and comfort me once again. I will praise you with the harp for your faithfulness, O my God. I'll sing praise to you with the lyre, O Holy One of Israel. My lips will shout for joy when I sing praise to you, I whom you have redeemed. My tongue will tell of your righteous acts all day long. For those who wanted to harm me have been put to shame and confusion. And when I think about that, I think, man, you are a testimony. You will praise him. And I love this idea. I'll declare it to the next generation. While I think a mom and a dad have the primary place in a child's life to bring the gospel, your faithfulness to our children with the gospel is stunning and amazing, and I thank God for it. So here's what I'd like to do. If I've got elders in the congregation, if you guys would come up, I want us to pray over Vickie, and then we're going to thank Vickie. Then we're going to move into our worship time. During our worship, just for this series, we're going to invite you to take communion whenever you're ready. We're not going to have a communion meditation. Wanted to make sure we have enough time to kind of go through people's stories, but as we're worshiping towards the end, go ahead and just as you feel ready to do that. Vic, you can stay right there, guys. Whoever's in the building still, go ahead and come up here, and we're going to pray over you, for you. Okay, cool. So yeah, you too. You guys just pray nice and loud for the congregation. We'll go Greg and then Tony, and then go from there.
Dear God, we just thank you for Vickie. God, we thank you for loving her. God, we thank you for carrying her and taking care of her. And God, we just thank you that you gave us insight, that you gave us the Spirit of Jesus Christ and the Spirit of love, that we can hold her when she needs to be held up. And that, God, we continue to look for you for strength. God, I thank you for her story. And God, I thank you for all the experiences that you've given her, and that you've given all of us, that we can testify to your greatness and that your ability to heal us and to keep us safe. And God, that you love us. God, I thank you for giving us family. God, I thank you for giving us each other as brothers and sisters in Christ. In Jesus' name I pray.
Lord, you're such a gracious God. And Lord, I just thank you so much for Vickie's life, both before and during and after her illness, Lord. I remember that time, and I thank you so much that the prayers of many were heard and that you answered your children on her behalf. Lord, I thank you and believe that she is even a better servant than she was beforehand, because she was put in a situation where she had to rely completely on others to serve. I thank you for the lessons. I thank you, Lord, for the promises that we see in Vickie's life lived out. Lord, the promise that you'll never forsake us or leave us, Lord, and you didn't. Even our lowest point and in our despair, Lord, we look back and know that that's when you carried us. And I also see the promise, Lord, that trials are there for our good, Lord. They help us and teach us just how dependent we are on you, Lord, and not ourselves. But they also teach us that when we come through them, that how to be a servant to others and how to help others in trials. And Vickie is a living testimony to that, Lord. I thank you for our parents, for the values that they instill in her, Lord, and for the ethics that she has and that we get to benefit from. And I just thank you for the blessing that she is to so many. In Jesus' name.